Hello everybody, welcome to Totally Tabled. My name is Shaggy, and today I'm running down my top 10 solo automas. You can call them AI systems or bots. These are competitive multiplayer games where the solo mode involves going against a solo opponent that simulates an actual player. They take turns, score points, and can win the game. Now my personal preference is when these systems are as simple and quick to run as possible. I personally don't mind if an automa plays by different rules or cheats a little bit in order to streamline their turns, and that preference will be reflected on this list. Okay, let's jump right in with number 10, Galactic Cruise. This is one of my most recent playthrough videos on the channel, so there's probably some recency bias going on here, but I really love Rachel, the solo opponent in Galactic Cruise. She gets her own player board and an action deck of cards that has a top and a bottom action on one side and a worker placement location with a pair of numbers on the other side. On Rachel's turn, you just flip a card and use the top of the deck to determine where to place her worker. Galactic Cruise is a worker placement game with worker bumping, so when she places her worker, she might bump your worker right back to you, which is really nice. And then no matter where she places her worker, she's going to try to take the top action that's on her flipped over card. If she can't take that action, then she'll do the bottom one. That's simple. There's a little bit of a downside in that there are 12 different actions in the game, and the way she does them often is slightly different than the way you do them, so you do need to learn those 12 other different actions. But you know, they're very simple, and after a game or two, it's very easy to manage her turns. Part of that is because she's extremely streamlined in the fact that she doesn't collect resources or really care about anything other than reputation and points. But other than that, she's, building ships, she's launching them off, she's, having cruises just like a regular player would. I also like that you're able to predict a little bit what she might do. For example, if she's out of workers, then that means that she's going to have to spend her turn recovering those workers, just like a human player. So you don't have to worry about her taking a worker placement spot. Little things like that mean that you care what she's doing. I think it works brilliantly. That is my number 10, Galactic Cruise. Number 9 is Everdell. There are two different solo modes in Everdell. I'm specifically referring to the solo opponent Nightweave and her army of spiderlings from the Mistwood expansion. According to Board Game Geek, the designer of the solo mode is Christy Pesky. I apologize if I'm butchering your name. If you're interested in how this one plays, I do have a full solo playthrough of it on my channel, so you can go check that out. Everdell is a worker placement game, but with open card drafting and tableau building. Nightweave uses a shuffled action deck, like a lot of these automas will, and her actions are very simple. She's just placing her spiderlings out to block worker placement spaces, or, grabbing cards from the meadow at random using a D8. She plays cards and builds up a tableau, but she doesn't care about the special abilities on those cards or collecting resources or anything like that. She does compete, though, for public goals, and she'll move through the seasons just like a real player. So she's really doing a good job of simulating those interaction points, right, with the other player. That's what a lot of the good solo AIs do. They focus on just those interaction points, and the rest of it can just be streamlined away. One of the things I find really impressive about this mode is that Everdell has a ton of expansion modules that you can add in or leave out, and Nightweave seemingly works with most of them, if not all of the expansions. Furthermore, there's also modules that you can add just to Nightweave, regardless of what expansions you have in play. There's different difficulty levels, a bunch of options that affect in-game scoring, so you have tons of customization when it comes to this solo mode. Really, the only big negative is that Nightweave is a spider, and that spider meeple kind of creeps me out, as I hate spiders. I'm not going to hold that against the mode, though. It's fantastic. That's my number 9, Everdell. Number 8 is Ginkgopolis. I've also done a full solo playthrough of this one. I really encourage you to go watch that. This is one of those games that doesn't get talked about as much as it should, and the solo mode I think is not well known at all, and it works really well. So go check that out. Don't let this one fly under the radar for you. Now the solo automa here is called HAL, and it's super easy to use. There's no separate action deck or anything. All you do is you draw just a random card off the main deck of cards. And he's always going to use that card in order to build. So you're also going to draw a random tile to go with the card. Ginkgopolis is a closed drafting, tile laying, and area majority game. So you're using these cards and these tiles in order to either build the city up or expand the city out. So Hal's going to be participating that in a random way for sure. But he ignores all penalties and all sort of special abilities and things like that. He doesn't worry about resource scarcity. He has all of his resources right from the beginning. Anytime he would like collect resources or tiles, he instead gets victory points. So Hal is just a very simplified and streamlined opponent, very random, and yet he manages to always make really devastating moves. Because of the randomness of his card and tile draws, he's often changing colors of buildings, so the area majority race gets very swingy, and especially at the end, can flip-flop a lot. And that's a good thing, you know? The multiplayer game is also extremely cutthroat and swingy, and so it's really impressive that the solo mode can capture that. It's actually sort of a miracle, really, that it works so well. At least check out the playthrough to see if this is something you might be interested in. I highly recommend it. One of my favorite games of all time. That's my number 8, Ginkgopolis. Number 7 is Obsession. This is probably the most streamlined AI system on this list. In fact, it's so streamlined, I think you might be able to argue that this is no longer a proper Automa system. I think it just meets the criteria, just barely, but I'm not going to die on that hill. I've included it anyway because I just love it so much. The way it works is you have a bunch of different opponents, which are just an individual card that you choose at the beginning of the game. Each one is a little bit more difficult than the last, so you can really zero in on an opponent that meets your skill level. Each includes a victory point total that you need to exceed in order to win. Each opponent also has a specific list of the improvement tiles that they've collected based on each season. And the whole thing is powered by a D20 system where you just roll a die, consult a small chart, and then take a simple action, which is basically just either buying a tile from the market or maybe resetting the entire market. That just keeps the tiles flowing and, never getting static, which can actually be a slight problem in the two-player game. One thing I love is that you're not collecting those tiles for the AI, you just discard them. Because like I said, each opponent has just the listing of the tiles right there on their card. And that's huge because you can see exactly how many points you need in order to keep pace with them for all of the different tile types or colors for all of the future seasons. That's a ton of foreknowledge, and it really changes which improvements you go after. It really changes your strategy. I also just like this design philosophy. The joy of Obsession is puzzling out your servants and your guests and trying to put on the best social activities and get the money to get the improvements for your estate, to restore your family's reputation. I'm just so happy to have an AI opponent that gets out of the way completely and lets me enjoy this puzzle. That's why Obsession is my number 7. Number 6 is Viticulture. Now, I believe this solo mode was introduced for the Viticulture Collector's Edition, or perhaps for the Viticulture Essential Edition, but it was also included in the Collector's Edition. I have the Collector's Edition, so that's what I'm basing this off of. I'm pretty sure this wasn't in the original base game. And this solo mode is noteworthy because I believe this is the birth of the Automa Factory, the group that designs the solo modes for Stonemaier games. Board Game Geek says the solo designer is Morten Pedersen. Sorry if I'm mispronouncing your name. And I believe he's the one who coined the term automa. Either way, this is about as simple as a solo opponent can get. At the beginning of each season, you just flip over an automa card and they're going to place anywhere from 0 to 3 workers, I believe, just out on the board to block worker placement spaces. That's all it's doing. And unlike the regular game, which like is a race to 20 points or something like that, here the solo game only lasts exactly 7 rounds. You essentially just need to get 20 points in 7 rounds. What makes this Automa work is that it replicates the most important part of viticulture, which is the worker placement angst and the timing of how you use your grande worker. You simply don't know what spots the Automa is going to block. And so if you use your grande worker in those earlier seasons, then you might get blocked in winter, and that could be a critical mistake. There you go. That's my number 6, Viticulture. Number 5 is 51st State Ultimate Edition. I specify Ultimate Edition because that's the version that contains the new Borgo Automa designed by Joe Leone. It is a much more interesting and brutal solo mode than the original. Now, 51st State is a card game where you're just going back and forth with the other player, taking really quick, simple actions, like, playing a card to your tableau, or then activating those cards for resources, that sort of thing. I really like that this solo system really nails that pace for the gameplay by making Borgo's actions really as simple as you could imagine. On his turn, you just flip over a card from the deck, and the type of card determines the action he'll take. He basically has 3 different actions based on 3 different icons, and then if it's any other icon, he'll sort of take his, regular action. And the interesting thing is that action changes depending on which expansion deck you're playing with. Each of the different expansion decks has sort of its own unique play style, which adds to Borgo's replayability. I also really like how aggressive he is, just constantly going after you. It really captures the competitive and in-your-face nature of this game. And not only does that really fit the theme, but it really makes it feel like you're playing against another player. Really an awesome solo mode. Definitely check it out. I've done a full playthrough, so go watch that. That's my number 5, 51st State Ultimate Edition. Number 4 is Lost Ruins of Arnak. I talk about this game a lot. I've done 2 playthroughs of this one, so you can go watch either of those. The first one was just with the base game. The second one is with the Leaders expansion. So I'll keep this short. Lost Ruins of Arnak is a worker placement and deck building game where you explore and discover more and better worker placement spots as the game goes along. The solo opponent in Arnak uses a shuffled deck of action tiles. You go back and forth, again, taking really quick actions one at a time. The interesting thing here with this system is that your rival doesn't pass until they've completed every single action in the stack, even if you pass much earlier. Unlike you, they're not limited to just 2 workers, and so they have all the rest of the workers, and they're just going to keep playing and blocking spaces. And as you reveal more and better spaces, they're going to go after and try to block all those prime worker placement spots, unless you get there first. And that really does a great job of recreating the turn angst of the multiplayer game. In Arnak, the timing of when you take actions really matters. And I like how with every action that the rival plays, it narrows down what they're going to play next, right? So it becomes more and more predictable. It's also really nice because there's an online app that you can use to run the solo opponent. This is just a great solo game. Highly recommend it. Obviously, one of my favorites, The Lost Ruins of Arnak. Number 3 is Civolution. This is another of my recent playthrough videos. I'm going a little cult of the new with this list, but I don't know, what can I say? Civolution is kind of a solo obsession with me right now. The automa in this game, VICE or Vicky, is a very streamlined AI system for a game of this complexity. She doesn't require a board, she doesn't collect resources or money or any of that, so most of the fiddliness has been removed with this solo system. Once again, like a lot of the games on this list, Vicky has an action deck. On their turn, you flip a card and you take the action that's shown. Often the card shows multiple actions, so you roll a die to pick between them. I like this because it adds a good amount of variety to Vicky's behavior and also some probabilities that you can work with. You know, certain actions are less likely to happen than others, and you can factor that into your strategy. Each of the cards also has a blue side with weaker actions and a red side with stronger actions. And you adjust Vicky's difficulty simply by changing how many eras you use the red side versus the blue side. And they also did a really smart thing with the way you make decisions when you're using the solo AI. Like, for example, if you need to pick between multiple places on the map, you roll a die and consult this kind of circular terrain preference chart. It's very easy to use, quick, effective way at making complicated decisions. I just absolutely love this game. That is Civolution, my number 3. Number 2 is the Castles of Burgundy Special Edition. Once again, I have to specify the Special Edition because I'm talking about the new solo mode that was developed specifically for this printing. Now, unlike Civolution, which is also a Feld game, and I assume that solo mode was designed by Feld himself, the Castles of Burgundy solo mode was developed not by Feld, but rather John Albertson, Nick Shaw, and David Turtzi. These are designers that have been involved in developing many solo modes to all sorts of games, and they just knocked it out of the park here. The solo opponent is not playing the exact same game you are, but at least it still feels like they're playing some sort of version of the Castles of Burgundy. You simply roll a die, then they will try to take a tile that corresponds to their 2 cards that they have in front of them, trying to fill up the cards to resolve them. If they have enough coins, then they'll take an additional tile from the middle, the little black market. And just like with a human player, you're racing them for all the different public goals. You're competing on the shipping track, all that stuff. It's all pretty simple, except for when they draft a building tile. That's when it gets a little bit more difficult because you need to check to see what the building does for them, because it's not going to be exactly the same as when you take a building. But the game comes with amazing player aids that really help with that process, and after a game or two, it becomes really quick. I really like how the solo cards make it obvious what tiles the bot is most likely to go after. So you can use that info to rush and take a tile that they might want, or, feel comfortable waiting a few turns to take something that they're most likely going to ignore. This really mimics the 2-player experience perfectly. The AI is challenging, and there are all sorts of different ways to adjust the difficulty to match your skill level. And as far as I know, the bot is compatible with all of the different expansions. I think there's something special about having one of my favorite 2-player games now with a solo mode that allows me to play anytime I want. That truly is a gift. And that's why it's my number 2, the Castles of Burgundy Special Edition. And number 1 is a bit of a surprise. It's Carnegie. Carnegie is a great medium-weight Euro game that doesn't get talked about nearly enough. And in the solo mode, you get to play against Carnegie himself. The AI system is brilliantly done, and it's so quick and simple to manage. On Carnegie's turn, you flip a card and it tells you exactly what action he'll take. And if he can't take that action, he simply scores victory points. I just love this, and I'm shocked more games haven't taken inspiration from this system. It works because very little mental load goes into running the AI, allowing you to focus on your turn without the game dragging on and on. And despite its simplicity, Carnegie mostly behaves like a human player. He's taking donation spots, he's taking locations on the map, and snatching up departments. But maybe the best part of this design is how it allows you to predict what actions Carnegie both wants you to take and is going to take in his future turn. That's because his preferred action is shown on the back of his action cards. Since all players take advantage of every action, it's really the order of those actions that's critical. Right? You're trying to choose actions that you're set up to be able to take advantage of, but your opponents aren't set up for that. And that's really the key to victory. You might see that Carnegie really wants you to take a certain action, so you go a different way. And then you see on his turn, he's going to take this action, so you can take an action to set up for that. It really adds a lot of strategy, a lot of thinking, great decision making. And of course, the game itself is spectacular. I'm not sure why this one doesn't get talked about more. Please check out my full solo playthrough of this one. That'll show you everything you need to know. But there you go. That is my number one top solo Automa, Carnegie. What Automa systems did I miss? I know that I had some surprising ones in here, some more recent ones. There are some big popular Automas that I didn't mention. Let me know all about it in the comments below. And if you like this video and the other videos on the channel, please think about subscribing. It would really help me out a lot. Well, that's it for me. Thank you so much for watching, and goodbye.